Sometimes, when life becomes too noisy and hectic, you just need to rest. Take a walk in the fresh air. Breathe in the silence. That's what I decided to do that day. Go to the park to calm my thoughts for a while. The weather wasn't promising. The sky was covered with clouds, and the air was humid and heavy, as if it sensed something. But I still headed to the park, hoping I could enjoy at least 20 minutes of solitude. The park was empty, and that immediately seemed strange. Usually, even on a weekday, you'd find a couple of people walking, children playing in the sandbox, or elderly people sitting on benches. But now there was no one. Only a few trees bent under the weight of the wind, and a thick fog that seemed to dissolve all sounds. I walked along the path, my gaze slipping over the gloomy alleys, when suddenly something caught my attention. In the distance, almost hidden behind dense bushes, I noticed a strange metal entrance, barely visible among the branches. It was so old and abandoned that I didn't immediately recognize the place. The heavy iron doors, covered in rust, bore the marks of many years of invisibility. I stopped, examining it. Why hadn't I noticed this entrance before? Or maybe this place had always been hidden from view, as if intentionally concealing itself from anyone passing by? Something inside me pushed me to make a decision. I decided to approach it. A strange feeling of silent pull, as if the place itself was calling me, not letting go. I didn't know why, but with every step, my heart beat faster and my breath grew heavier, as if I were walking there not just by my own will. As I approached the entrance, I noticed the doors weren't locked. Standing in front of them, I stopped, feeling a strange wave of anxiety wash over me. Deep inside my head, it was as if a voice was trying to dissuade me, but I didn't listen. I wanted to know what was hidden here in this abandoned corner of the world. Sighing and gathering my strength, I pushed the door open. Inside, it was dark and damp. The air was so humid that it felt like it had been still here for centuries. My footsteps echoed down the long, dark corridors. The tunnels led somewhere deep underground, and this strange emptiness made me feel like I had become part of something much larger than just a walk in the park. Then I noticed something even stranger. Faint but distinct drawings began to appear on the walls, seemingly made a long time ago. They were dull, like old graffiti, but their shapes seemed familiar, even though I couldn't decipher them. And on top of everything, with every step, I felt like I wasn't alone. It was almost as if I could hear someone watching my every move from behind. I turned my head, but there was no one there. The feeling of this invisible presence was terrifying. What am I doing here? I thought, but my legs were already moving forward, as if I didn't belong to myself anymore. I walked further, and the feeling of emptiness around me grew more and more oppressive. The sounds of my breathing echoed through the tunnels, and each step seemed like a violation of some ancient peace, a breach of boundaries that should have remained untouched long ago. I felt like I wasn't alone in these underground labyrinths. Though I saw nothing but damp walls and dim light, it seemed that something invisible, something hidden, was moving alongside me. The walls around me began to change shape, becoming rougher, as if carved from stone. The tunnels twisted, disappearing around corners, and with every new step, I ventured deeper into this underground world. There was a strange, pungent smell in the air, not quite mold, but something older, something I couldn't comprehend. The temperature also changed. While it was still relatively warm on the surface, here underground it was cold, as if it were winter. I reached a door that seemed unusual. It was an old iron door covered with a thick layer of rust, and had strange symbols carved into it. I tried to push one of the doors, but it barely budged, and when I stepped into the dark passage, I was hit by a cold draft, as if from the very depths of the earth. Walking a little further, I found myself in a room that struck me with its strange atmosphere. The bunker I had discovered was completely empty, except for the old things scattered around. Old metal tables, rusty tools, papers that had lost their shape, and huge shelves filled with incomprehensible equipment. This place had once been something important, but now it was as dead as everything inside it. What was strange wasn't just the complete chaos that reigned here, but the feeling I had that I wasn't in an abandoned bunker, but in a hidden storage of something forbidden, as if my steps were violating someone's forbidden territory. Suddenly, I felt something very odd, a movement in the air, as if someone had run past me. I turned around but saw no one. The cold, piercing to the bone, seemed to be everywhere, and the air itself became so thick that I could barely breathe. Whispers. They were barely audible, but desperately persistent. They sounded as if someone were standing right behind me. I froze, listening, but this time the whispers didn't fade. On the contrary, they grew louder. They began to form words that I could barely make out. "Don't leave." I felt a strange sense of fear wash over me. Everything around me seemed to come alive. The shelves of equipment, old magazines, even the air. These whispers weren't a part of ordinary reality. They seemed to come from the very bunker, as if the walls, ceiling, and even the floor were soaked with these sounds. I took a step back and once again felt a sharp gust of air. It was cold, unnaturally cold, as if something or someone was watching me from the dark corners of this place. I couldn't understand what was happening, but the fear inside me grew with every second. Suddenly, I realized that I shouldn't have come here. My body seemed to act on its own, without any conscious decision. I needed to get out of here without looking back. The whispers continued, but I could no longer perceive them. I moved forward, and each step felt like a step into the unknown, as if I wasn't just walking through this place, but as if it were pulling me deeper. I walked through the dark, narrow corridors of the bunker, and with each step, the feeling of something or someone being present grew stronger. Seconds dragged on, and every corner, every new room seemed to wait for me with an unfamiliar threat. The walls of the bunker were covered in dark mold, and the old, dimly glowing lamps barely illuminated the way. In this semi-darkness, everything seemed out of place. All the old things I came across looked like reminders that something greater than just the mundane use of this place had once happened here. When I approached one of the walls, I noticed a few old photographs, faded and covered in dust. They were pictures of people in military uniforms, with tense expressions, standing by the walls of the bunker. In one of the pictures, someone was even smiling, but the smile seemed unnatural, strained, as though they knew something they shouldn't have. But all of that was just details, tiny fragments of the grim past of this place, long unseen by anyone. My footsteps echoed in the empty, gloomy rooms, but the further I went, the stronger the strange cold became, which never disappeared. It pierced through me, and there was no explanation for it. I looked up, trying to discern anything ahead, and there at the end of the corridor I saw a light. It was dim, as if the light came from somewhere behind a locked door. My heart began to beat faster as I approached. Opening the door, I found myself in a large room. In the center was a massive table, covered with a thick layer of dust, and on it lay papers, old maps, incomprehensible blueprints. Everything looked like an archaeological find, like something forgotten by time. But something was wrong in this place. It was as if all these things hadn't just been forgotten, but deliberately left behind, like part of some experiment, or maybe even a trap for those who dared to look inside. The moment I got closer and saw something that completely unbalanced me, it was as dark as everything else around. On the table was a photograph, fresh, with no signs of time. It was a picture of my face, exactly as it was now, as if the photo had been taken at the very moment I stood by the table. Suddenly, the room grew colder. An ominous silence hung in the air, and I felt a barely audible step behind me. I turned around, but there was no one there. "You're not alone," whispered a voice, and I froze, overwhelmed by an indescribable fear. The voice didn't come from the air. It was somewhere close, but it couldn't be seen. It wasn't just an echo. It was something more. I quickly turned and hurried toward the exit. But something made me stop for a moment. A shadow, barely discernible, flickered past me. It was indistinct, like smoke, but the outline of a human figure could still be traced. The shadow moved smoothly, as if following me. My thoughts couldn't process what was happening, but I hastily moved toward the exit. Every movement was painfully difficult, as if with each step I was pulling the last of my strength out of myself. But something unknown didn't want to let me go. It was clear, as though an intangible force was pulling me back into the dark depths of the bunker. My footsteps sounded too loud in this darkness, and every sound seemed too distinct, as if the whole bunker was tuned to hear and respond to my movements. I moved quickly, feeling my legs grow heavy, as though it wasn't me, but something else leading me through these dark corridors. I turned around again, and for a moment, it seemed like a figure emerged from around the corner. I froze, unable to believe my eyes, but there in the empty corridor, no one was there. My mind tried to find a logical explanation. Maybe I had noticed something in the shadow, maybe it was just a gust of wind, but I knew it wasn't like that. Everything happening here had no logic, and with each passing moment, the fear grew stronger. And then, when I turned back to the exit, something appeared in the air, a feeling of heaviness, an invisible pressure, as if every moment someone invisible was walking behind me, not letting go. The whispers grew louder again, and now they weren't just echoing in my head, they were everywhere. In every corner, in every crevice, in the very air itself. I couldn't understand where they were coming from, but I was sure not all of them were human. "You won't leave here," whispered someone at the very moment I was about to take a step. I froze. This wasn't just a whisper. It was an order. My hand clenched the door handle, but I couldn't turn it. I felt something pulling me back, as if some unseen force was holding me within these walls. I looked up all the way to the end of the corridor and noticed how the dim light began to fade and disappear, swallowed by the darkness. Time here seemed to slow down, and I began to understand that these entities didn't just want me to stay. They wanted me to become part of this place, part of their world. Unaware of what I was doing, I stepped into the next room, and all my efforts to stay calm vanished the moment I was inside. In the dark corner of the room, I saw a figure. It stood motionless, unmoving. I couldn't make out who it was, but everything about this figure told me it didn't belong to this world. The shadow didn't move, but I felt its gaze, like a cold touch on my skin. Its eyes, or what I could call eyes, were empty, soulless. It seemed to me that this entity was not just a spirit, not just a ghost. It was something much older, unimaginable. "You won't be able to leave," the voice echoed again, now louder, as if it surrounded me from all sides. I felt the space around me tighten with each passing second, and the doors, the very ones I had just barely noticed, became invisible. It was as if I had become part of something that had long been waiting to swallow me. I felt the air grow so thick that I could barely breathe. The fear became unbearable. I suddenly turned and ran, but it seemed that the footsteps were chasing me. They sounded from the dark corners, from every turn in the tunnels. These entities followed me, not giving me a chance to escape. The whispers grew louder. They didn't stop. They were in my consciousness, in my head, as if I had become part of this dark, dead universe. I had to get out, but the closer I got to the exit, the denser this invisible world became. And I knew that if I didn't leave now, I would stay here forever. Fear gripped my body, and with every step I took in my attempt to escape, this fear grew stronger. I ran, not understanding what was happening, not knowing where I was, but I couldn't stop. The tunnels continued to pull me deeper, as if the walls themselves were trying to swallow me. My steps echoed through the empty corridors, but now the echo sounded not only like my own fear. It became dark and ominous, like a harbinger of something much bigger. I tried to find an exit, but I couldn't figure out where to go. Every door, every corridor I ran down seemed like a repetition of the one before. Everywhere, there was the same darkness, the same whispers, the same cold, empty walls. I felt them nearby, those entities, watching my every move. I think I heard footsteps. But they weren't mine. It was something else. The sound was too smooth, too unnatural, as if something was moving in the darkness, not touching the floor. "You won't leave," the voice whispered again, now right behind me. I turned around, but there was no one, just darkness. My fingers groped along the wall, trying to find some kind of reference point. It was a room with no windows, no doors, just a single iron door ahead. I stepped toward it, but I felt a shadow, like a living creature, cover me from behind. It was invisible but palpable. I almost could feel its cold breath, its presence. It was chasing me, not giving me a single chance of escape. I tried to open the door. It was locked. Suddenly, light, dim and flickering, illuminated the room again. I felt something begin to crack inside me, as if reality itself was starting to break apart. Everything around me became unstable, blurry, as if I was no longer in the present time and place. In that moment, I realized this wasn't a place. This was a trap for those who dared to enter. And now I was part of this cursed world. I tried to open the door again. No luck. I pounded on it, begged, pleaded, but the door wouldn't budge. Fear overwhelmed me. I turned around to see what was happening around me. The shadow was near again, but now it wasn't alone. There were many of them. The entities began to fill the room, their figures becoming more distinct, but they remained shadows, empty and lifeless. I couldn't understand what they wanted, but one thing was clear: they didn't want me to leave. I rushed to the door, panicked, begging for an exit. I felt the whole room darkening, and soon I was in total darkness. And then, finally, I felt the door open. The exit. Light. Everything around me began to fade, as if I had returned to reality. In an instant, the darkness dissipated, and I found myself back on the surface. The bunker was behind me, its shadows, its whispers, its entities. All of it was left in the dark corridors where I should never have been. I stood in that same park where it all began. Silence surrounded me. I looked around, unable to believe my eyes. Everything looked as though nothing had happened. No bunker, no strange entrance, no nightmares I had endured. But something in the air wasn't right. That feeling wouldn't leave me. I will never go back there. I won't seek answers because I already know them. I was merely a part of something that defies understanding. And if I ever find myself in that park again, if my gaze meets that strange entrance once more, I will run without thinking about anything. I no longer want to know what lies hidden in those dungeons, in those cursed tunnels. Everything I saw was too terrifying to return to. And so, I left. Forever. Like, subscribe to the channel. More interesting things await you.